The heavy, time-worn sack hit the marble floor with a thud so loud it echoed through the grand banking hall. The entire room turned silent. All eyes locked onto the frail yet unwavering figure standing before the counter. A petite, elderly black woman, wrapped in a faded, earth-toned shawl that looked like it had been woven in another century. A slow smirk crept across the bank manager's face. Henry Whitmore, a man who had built his career on arrogance and numbers, folded his arms and gave her a patronizing look. "Ma'am," he drawled, glancing at the sack dismissively. "I think you're in the wrong place. This is a bank, not a pawn shop." Soft laughter rippled through the line of customers. A suited man snorted. A woman checking her phone smirked. The security guards at the entrance, two tall, stocky men in pressed uniforms, exchanged knowing glances, already moving closer to intervene if necessary. The old woman's expression didn't change. If anything, she seemed amused. She ran a weathered hand over the sack, her fingers grazing the fabric like it held something precious. "That," she said, her voice steady, "that is the reason this bank exists." More laughter, louder this time. Whitmore chuckled and leaned on the counter. "Oh, really?" he said mockingly. "So, you're telling me you own this bank?" The woman didn't blink, didn't hesitate. She simply met his gaze with quiet certainty. "I don't need to tell you anything," she said. "You'll figure it out soon enough." Whitmore's smirk faltered, just for a second. There was something about the way she said it. Something that made the polished floor feel suddenly less stable beneath his feet. And then the sack shifted. The fabric loosened just enough for a glimmer of something to peek through. Old paper. Fragile, yet undeniably powerful. Whitmore's amusement wavered. His instincts told him something wasn't right, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Excuse me, but we're going to have to ask you to leave," one of the security guards said, stepping forward. His voice was firm, but there was a hint of hesitation now. The old woman's gaze snapped to him, and for the first time, a small smile ghosted across her lips. "Oh, son," she said softly, "you really don't want to do that." The room seemed to shrink. The air thickened. The weight of something far greater than all of them combined pressed into the sterile walls. And then, a deafening bang. People screamed. A woman dropped her purse. A child clutched their mother's leg. The security guards drew their weapons, but froze when they saw what had happened. The sack had split open, and what tumbled out sent the entire bank into chaos. Bundles of ancient documents, bound in faded twine, covered the floor. Yellowed contracts, deeds, pages stamped with seals so old they predated the very foundation of the city. Legal documents that bore the name of the bank itself. Whitmore's face drained of color. The old woman reached down, picked up a particularly worn page, and carefully unfolded it. She held it up for everyone to see. "I don't just own this bank," she said. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "I built it." Silence. And then, someone in line gasped. A man squinted at the page in her hand, his mouth parting in shock. No way," he murmured. Whitmore's hands trembled as he reached for the document. "That's not possible," he whispered. That's centuries old." The old woman merely nodded. "Indeed it is." One of the security guards, who had been ready to drag her out moments ago, swallowed hard. His grip on his firearm loosened. "Ma'am," he said, barely above a whisper. Who are you?" The woman's expression didn't change. She let the question hang in the air, letting the weight of it sink into every stunned soul in that room. Whitmore's fingers clenched into a fist. He was losing control of the situation. "I don't know what kind of scam this is, but," he started, but his voice betrayed his fear. He turned to a teller. "Call security headquarters. Get legal down here now." But before the teller could move, the front doors burst open. A group of men in crisp suits strode in. Their expressions were grim. Their movements were purposeful. And leading them, a black man in his 40s, wearing a sharp navy blue suit. A man whose presence commanded the room. Whitmore froze. "Mr. Hawthorne," he stammered. Malcolm Hawthorne, the CEO of the bank's entire corporate empire, stepped forward. His eyes scanned the documents on the floor. His gaze flickered toward the old woman. And then he smiled. "Ah," Hawthorne said, voice smooth as silk. "So the legend is true." Whitmore's stomach dropped. "Legend?" The old woman chuckled. "I didn't think you'd recognize me, boy," she mused. "But I suppose you were always the smart one." Whitmore felt like the walls were closing in. His breath came fast and shallow. "Someone explain to me what's going on," he demanded. "Now." Hawthorne exhaled slowly, as if savoring the moment. Then he turned to face the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying through the cavernous bank lobby, "allow me to introduce you to Josephine Carter. She is not only one of the original landowners of this property, but the woman whose trust and investments seeded the very foundation of this institution." Murmurs spread like wildfire. A woman gasped audibly. Whitmore shook his head, his face pale. That's impossible." Josephine Carter simply raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" Hawthorne reached down, picked up one of the papers, and held it up for Whitmore to see. "You know what this means, don't you?" Hawthorne said, tilting his head. "It means she's not just a customer, not just an investor. She's your boss." Whitmore staggered backward, his throat tightening. His world, the empire of power he had so carefully built, was crumbling around him. Josephine Carter took a single step forward. And then, she leaned in, just enough for only him to hear. "Now," she said softly, "why don't you pour me a cup of tea while we discuss what happens next?" The bank manager, still smirking, cleared his throat. "Miss, we've indulged this long enough. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security." But the old woman didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head as if amused by his ignorance. Her fingers tightened around the sack, making the fabric rustle ominously. A hush had fallen over the bank as employees and customers alike watched the confrontation unfold with bated breath. "You think I'm joking?" the manager snapped, his voice rising. "Security, get this woman out of here." A thick-set security guard in a navy uniform approached, his hand hovering over his belt. He glanced at the old woman, sizing her up, before addressing her in a patronizing tone. "Ma'am, let's not make a scene. If you don't have business here, I'm going to have to escort you out." The woman slowly turned her gaze to him. "Boy," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "you might want to think carefully before putting your hands on me." The security guard hesitated. There was something about her, the way she carried herself, the unwavering confidence in her stance. It made his gut churn with unease. "Enough of this," the manager barked. "Get her out. Now!" The security guard reached out, but before he could lay a hand on her, the old woman took a step forward, letting her sack drop to the marble floor with a heavy thud. The sound echoed through the bank like a gunshot. A few people gasped. Some took an instinctive step back, eyes darting from the sack to the woman's face. Even the manager flinched. The old woman lifted her chin. "I said I own this bank, and if you won't listen to me, then maybe you'll listen to this." With deliberate slowness, she reached down, untied the sack, and pulled it open. The moment the contents spilled onto the floor, the room erupted into chaos. Bundles upon bundles of cash poured out, crisp bills fluttering like fallen leaves. The amount was staggering, far more money than any regular customer would casually carry. The security guard's mouth fell open. The manager stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet. The tellers stared wide-eyed, as if they had just witnessed a ghost. The bank lobby was silent. The old woman calmly reached into the sack and pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. She opened it with a practiced ease, flipping through the pages before landing on the one she wanted. Then she looked up, her dark brown eyes locking onto the manager's. "This," she said, tapping the page with a single finger, "is my bank's ownership record. The name listed? Mine. I bought this bank decades ago, long before you ever stepped foot in here. But I left it in the hands of men who I trusted. And now I come back to find fools laughing in my face." The manager's face had gone pale. "This is a mistake. A prank. This can't be real." The old woman arched an eyebrow. "Shall we call the authorities then? Have them verify it?" "I insist." The security guard swallowed hard. He suddenly looked very unsure of himself. But the manager's pride wouldn't let him back down so easily. "You expect me to believe that some old woman just walked in here with a bag full of money and a random ledger claiming ownership? I need proof. Real proof." The old woman smirked. "You want proof? Then check the vault records. Check the original deeds. Check the name of the founding owner in the system. I guarantee every single one of them leads back to me." The customers and staff were frozen in place, drinking in the spectacle with fascination and shock. Some pulled out their phones, recording the moment. The manager hesitated. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "Well, we can certainly check the records," he muttered. "But I doubt they'll say." "Then check them," the woman said, her tone sharp, daring him to prove her wrong. The manager signaled to one of the tellers. "Run a search in the system," he ordered, his voice tight. "Check for the original owner of this bank." The teller, a young woman who had been watching the entire ordeal unfold with wide eyes, nodded hastily and turned to her computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The silence stretched thick with tension. The seconds ticked by like an eternity. Then suddenly, she froze. Her gaze flicked between the screen and the old woman standing before her. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Yes, sir, she's telling the truth. The records list her as the original owner of this bank." The manager's breath hitched. That's not possible. Let me see that." He stormed over to the computer, peering at the screen, his eyes darting over the lines of data. His lips parted, his face drained of color. The name listed under the founding ownership records was indeed the old woman's. His legs nearly buckled beneath him. A stunned murmur rippled through the bank. The old woman folded her arms across her chest. "Now, do you believe me? Or do I need to call my lawyers to remind you who really owns this place?" The manager opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Because in that moment, he realized the full weight of his mistake. And worse, the nightmare had only just begun. The laughter in the bank had died down, replaced with an eerie silence. Mrs. Geraldine stood firm, her gaze piercing through the mocking tellers and the condescending branch manager. The sack in her hands remained unopened, its contents still a mystery. But now, the weight of the moment had shifted, and an uncomfortable tension filled the air. "So, what now?" The manager, Mr. Thornton, forced a chuckle, but his confidence had wavered. "You expect me to believe you're the owner of this bank just because you walked in here with an old sack?" Geraldine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she reached into the sack. The bank employees leaned in, their curiosity outweighing their skepticism. The customers who had been waiting in line held their breath. The security guards, who had been standing near the entrance, exchanged uncertain glances. From the depths of the worn-out sack, Geraldine pulled out a thick leather-bound book. Its cover was faded, but the golden lettering still gleamed under the bank's fluorescent lights. "What is that?" Thornton scoffed, though his voice carried a tinge of unease. "A ledger," Geraldine said simply. "The original ownership records of this bank." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thornton snatched the book from her hands and flipped through the pages. His expression darkened as he scanned the signatures, dates, and official seals. This can't be real," he muttered. Geraldine reached into the sack again, this time pulling out aged legal documents, yellowed with time but still intact. "It is real," she said firmly. "My father, Thomas Whitmore, founded this bank nearly 60 years ago. Before this building stood, he built the first branch with his bare hands. When he passed, ownership transferred to my family. And yet, through deceit and fraud, that ownership was stolen from us." Thornton's face paled. The tellers behind him shifted uncomfortably. "That's a bold claim," he said through clenched teeth. "But it doesn't prove anything." Geraldine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, it proves plenty. But I'm not done yet." She turned toward the stunned crowd of onlookers. "This bank was built on my father's back. And yet, the men who worked under him, men who had nothing before he gave them a chance, conspired to erase him from history. They altered records, manipulated documents, and made sure that no one in my family could reclaim what was rightfully ours." A deep hush fell over the bank. Some of the older customers exchanged knowing glances, as if recalling whispers of the past. "That's absurd," Thornton snapped, his desperation creeping through. "You think you can just waltz in here, wave some old papers around, and demand ownership? The world doesn't work like that." Geraldine arched an eyebrow. "No. Then let's talk about Mr. William Carter, the man who signed away my family's legacy without a single legal right to do so. He forged my father's signature on key documents that transferred ownership to a board of directors who had been plotting against him. I have the proof right here." She lifted another document from the sack, one that bore the unmistakable signs of forgery. Thornton's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You can't possibly." Before he could finish, a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "I remember that name." An elderly black man, leaning heavily on a cane, stepped forward. "William Carter. I was a teller here when all that went down. I remember seeing him meet with the board behind closed doors. There were rumors that something shady was happening." Gasps spread through the room. Geraldine turned to the man and nodded. "I appreciate your honesty, sir. You've just confirmed what I already knew." Thornton took a step back. His confidence had crumbled. This doesn't mean anything. Even if what you say is true, you have no legal standing. Geraldine smiled again, this time with satisfaction. You think I'd walk in here unprepared? I have lawyers reviewing these documents as we speak. I have witnesses who are ready to testify. And more importantly, I have the media waiting outside. Thornton's eyes widened in horror. Just then, the doors of the bank swung open, and several well-dressed individuals strode in, their briefcases in hand. A woman at the front, sharp-eyed and commanding, locked her gaze onto Thornton. Mr. Thornton, she said coolly, I'm attorney Camille Hayes, representing Mrs. Geraldine Whitmore. I suggest you step aside, because this bank is about to have new leadership. The color drained from Thornton's face. And just as he opened his mouth to argue, the sound of sirens blared from outside. The police had arrived. Geraldine's lips curved into a knowing smirk. It's about time. The bank lobby fell into a thick silence, the weight of disbelief pressing down on everyone. Mrs. Eleanor stood tall, her wrinkled hands gripping the sack like it contained the very soul of the establishment. Across from her, Mr. Cartwright's smug expression had crumbled into something resembling horror. The whispers from the crowd grew louder, some in shock, others in awe. Mrs. Eleanor, this is absurd. Cartwright snapped, attempting to regain control of the situation. You can't seriously expect us to believe. Believe? Eleanor interrupted, her voice calm yet razor-sharp. I don't need you to believe. The truth stands on its own. The security guards who had been ready to escort her out now hesitated. The manager looked to them, but they were frozen in place, waiting for some undeniable proof before making their next move. Eleanor sighed as if she had been through this too many times before. Slowly, she bent down, opened the sack, and pulled out a collection of aged documents, their edges yellowed with time. She handed the top one to Cartwright. His eyes scanned the page, his breath hitching the further he read. His fingers trembled as they traced the signatures at the bottom. This is the original deed to this land, Eleanor confirmed. Signed by my late husband, Arthur Williams, the original owner and founder of this bank. And here, she pulled out another document, is the contract transferring ownership to me upon his passing. Cartwright stumbled back, his confidence dissolving before everyone's eyes. This can't be legal. This must be forged, he protested, but his voice lacked the authority it held moments ago. Eleanor chuckled, a deep, knowing laugh. You can call in your lawyers if you'd like, but you might want to check with the city's records first. Everything will match. Every dot, every signature, every notarized seal. This bank was never yours to run. It has always belonged to my family. A murmur spread through the lobby like wildfire. The tellers, the customers, even the security guards, all exchanged looks of disbelief. The mighty Mr. Cartwright, brought to his knees by an elderly woman with a sack. Impossible, he whispered, his face pale. Not impossible, Eleanor corrected. Just inconvenient for you. A young bank associate, one who had always found Cartwright's leadership to be overbearing, stepped forward hesitantly. Mrs. Eleanor, if what you're saying is true, then what happens now? Eleanor turned to her with a kind smile. Now, she looked around the room, scanning the faces of the people who had unknowingly been a part of her legacy. Now, we make things right. But before she could elaborate, the doors to the bank suddenly burst open. A group of men in suits strode in with purpose, their presence radiating authority. The lead man, tall with sharp eyes, stopped in front of Eleanor and Cartwright, holding up an official-looking document. I am Robert Langley from the Federal Banking Commission, he announced. We received an urgent tip regarding fraudulent activities within this establishment. Cartwright visibly stiffened. Fraudulent? What are you talking about? Langley ignored him, turning to Eleanor instead. Mrs. Eleanor Williams? Yes, that's me. He extended a hand. We've been looking for you. Your late husband's name has surfaced in several financial investigations over the years, but no one could ever locate his rightful heir. Until now, the room collectively held its breath. Ma'am, Langley continued, you may have just uncovered the biggest financial scandal this town has ever seen. Cartwright's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. I have done nothing wrong. Langley barely spared him a glance before focusing back on Eleanor. There is a great deal we need to discuss. But first, we need to ensure you are safe. Eleanor arched an eyebrow. Safe? Langley hesitated. The people who have controlled this bank for decades, they will not take this news lightly. A chill settled over the room. The revelation had already sent shockwaves through the bank, but now, an even darker truth loomed. Eleanor tightened her grip on the sack, her eyes burning with determination. Then let them come. I've waited long enough. And just like that, the doors slammed shut again, this time from the outside. The security guards exchanged wary glances, reaching for their radios. Someone was coming, and they weren't happy. The weight of the moment hung thick in the air as Margaret leveled her sharp gaze at the stunned bank executives. Every fiber of her being radiated authority, and yet they still clung to their disbelief, their laughter now replaced with nervous glances and the subtle shifting of feet. The guards who had once been ready to toss her out now hesitated, awaiting orders that never came. Mr. Davidson's face was ghostly pale, his confidence shattered. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is absolutely absurd," he sputtered. "There's no way an old woman like you owns this bank." Margaret let a small smirk play on her lips before she reached into the sack once more. "I thought you might say that," she said, her voice calm but commanding. From within the folds of the bag, she retrieved a set of papers, pristine and official-looking. She handed them to one of the younger executives who had been silent throughout the ordeal. "Go ahead, read it out loud," she instructed. The young man hesitated but obeyed, clearing his throat as he scanned the document. "These are official ownership records," he murmured. "It lists Margaret Holloway as the primary shareholder and owner of this bank." His eyes darted back to Margaret, disbelief clear in his expression. The entire room fell into stunned silence. Davidson snatched the papers from the young man's hands, scanning them desperately for some loophole, some mistake. This can't be real," he whispered, shaking his head. "This must be some sort of scam." Margaret chuckled, a deep, knowing sound that sent a chill through the room. "A scam, you say?" she mused. "Mr. Davidson, your own legal team drafted those documents years ago. I simply never had to make my presence known. Until now." Davidson's jaw clenched. He was losing control, and he knew it. His mind raced for a way to salvage the situation. "Even if this were true, which I highly doubt," he sneered, "what exactly do you plan to do? This is still my domain. You may own the shares on paper, but I run this bank." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Do you?" she asked, an edge of amusement in her voice. "Are you sure about that?" The front doors to the bank suddenly swung open, and a line of individuals in crisp suits marched inside, their expressions unreadable. The room tensed as they approached the counter. "Who are they?" one of the tellers whispered to a colleague. Davidson's face drained of color as he recognized the group. The lead individual, a sharp-looking woman with a badge clipped to her blazer, stepped forward. "Margaret Holloway, we've been expecting your call." Margaret nodded in greeting. "Right on time," she said, as if she had orchestrated this moment down to the very second. Davidson gawked. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice shaky. The woman didn't so much as glance at him. Instead, she turned to Margaret. "We've completed our review. Everything checks out. You are, without question, the legal owner and majority shareholder of Holloway Bank and Trust. We are here to enforce the necessary transitions." Davidson's lips parted, his protests dying before they could leave his mouth. "Transitions," he echoed weakly. Margaret exhaled slowly, savoring the moment. Then, she turned her full attention to Davidson. "Yes," she said simply. "As of this moment, you are no longer in control of this institution. Your tenure as CEO has officially come to an end." The silence in the room was deafening. Davidson's entire world was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "No," he muttered, shaking his head violently. "No, this is a mistake. I built this place. I made this bank what it is." Margaret regarded him coolly. "You exploited this place. You ran it into the ground. And worst of all, you disrespected me when I walked in here today." She leaned in just slightly. "Big mistake." Davidson turned frantically to his board members. "You can't let this happen," he pleaded. "You all know me. You know what I've done for this company." But one by one, their gazes dropped, their loyalty evaporating in real time. They saw where the power had shifted, and none of them wanted to go down with Davidson. Margaret straightened her posture, looking as regal as ever. "There's more to come," she said, her voice promising the storm that was about to follow. "Much more." Just then, one of the suited officials approached Davidson and extended a folder. "These are your termination papers," he stated. "We'll need you to vacate the premises immediately." Davidson's hands shook as he took the folder, his mind unable to process how swiftly the tides had turned. "You can't do this," he whispered, almost to himself. "This can't be happening." Margaret watched him with an air of finality. "Oh, but it is," she said, her voice steady. "And we're only getting started." The weight of her words settled over the room like an unstoppable force. But just as the final nail was about to be hammered into Davidson's fate, a voice suddenly rang out from the crowd. "You think you've won, old woman?" Margaret turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as an unexpected figure stepped forward, a wicked smirk on his face. And just like that, the battle wasn't over yet. The bank lobby was frozen in stunned silence. Security guards, bank executives, and nosy bystanders all gawked at the old black woman standing proudly before them. Her wrinkled hands gripped the sack tightly, her stance unshaken despite the jeers and condescending laughs that had erupted just moments ago. But now those same people who had dismissed her as a joke were feeling the weight of their own ignorance. "What did you just say?" the bank manager, still pale-faced, sputtered. "You heard me loud and clear," she replied, her voice steady, unwavering. "This bank, your bank, belongs to me, and I have the receipts to prove it." She reached into the sack and pulled out a thick, weathered folder. She slapped it onto the counter, and a few sheets slipped out. The bank manager reached for them hesitantly, his fingers trembling. His eyes scanned the pages, legal documents, contracts, deeds, and business agreements with her name on them. Signed, sealed, undeniable. The murmurs in the room grew into a frenzy. The guards exchanged looks, their hands loosening around their weapons. The receptionist, who had sneered at the old woman earlier, took a step back, as if hoping to disappear into the walls. And the smug executive, the one who had laughed the loudest, was now silent, his face twisted in horror. "No, this isn't possible," he muttered. "This has to be some kind of mistake." The old woman chuckled softly, her knowing eyes piercing into his. "The only mistake here was thinking that I was beneath you." A younger man, one of the financial advisors who had remained silent during the ordeal, cautiously stepped forward. He flipped through the papers, his eyes widening as realization dawned. "These documents, they're authentic. She owns the controlling shares. She's the majority shareholder." The bank manager nearly choked. "What? That's right," the old woman said. "I built this institution when people like you wouldn't even look me in the eye. I financed it, nurtured it, and secured its future. And now, after all these years, I come in through the front doors, and what do I get? Disrespect. Mockery. Humiliation." The room grew unbearably quiet. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. Then, in one swift motion, she turned to the security guards, her voice firm. "Escort these men out of my bank." The guards hesitated. Their job had been to protect the executives, to ensure that the woman was thrown out. But now they knew the truth. Their loyalty shifted in an instant. One of them nodded and stepped forward. "You heard her," he said, grabbing the shocked executive by the arm. "Let's go." "You can't do this," the executive shouted. "I've worked here for years. You have no right." "I have every right," the old woman interrupted. "This is MY Bank. And as of today, you're no longer welcome in it." The guards began dragging him toward the doors. The receptionist, still in shock, barely had time to react before another guard gestured for her to follow. She stammered, her arrogance now replaced with desperation. "Ma'am, please, I didn't know. I was just doing my job." The old woman tilted her head, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "And I'm doing mine. You may leave now." One by one, the individuals who had scorned her were removed. Some pleaded, some cursed, but all of them left in disgrace. The remaining employees stood frozen, waiting for what would come next. The old woman turned back to the stunned financial advisor and gave him a slight nod. "Tell the staff that there will be new policies in place, effective immediately. I will personally oversee them. This bank will serve its people with dignity. No more discrimination. No more power plays. Just fairness and integrity." The young man nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Right away." She exhaled slowly, her gaze sweeping across the room. A lifetime of struggle, of perseverance, had led to this moment. She had fought for her place in this world, and she had won. As she turned to leave, a few customers who had witnessed the entire ordeal began clapping. One by one, the applause grew until the entire lobby was filled with cheers. The guards stood at attention, showing their respect. Even the employees who had once doubted her now looked at her with admiration. She walked toward the exit, head held high. But before stepping outside, she turned back one last time, her voice ringing with power. "Old black woman with a sack claims bank ownership." They laughed until they regretted it. And with that, she walked out into the sun victorious. If you felt inspired by Margaret's victory and the message of standing up for what's right, make sure to hit that like button. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this powerful story. Do you think Margaret's actions will inspire others to take a stand? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss out on more stories of triumph, justice, and truth. Join our community and hit the bell so you're the first to know when we drop new content. This is just the beginning of many more incredible stories to come. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters.